Welcome to our second episode of Concussed Understanding the Invisible Injury, brought to you by the good people at Fired Up Networks and, of course, Stop Concussions and Shift Concussion Management Group. Tonight's a special show. And the reason is that I'm going to bring up a person who is not playing a big role in our lives and helping, obviously, the Gooch Live productions, Gooch Live, The Journey, and many other shows, but he's also a big part of our Concussed platform. Concussed was a book that I wrote with Keith Primo and myself, where we outlined the cause, effect, and consequences of the injury as an athlete. Why do we play when we know we're hurt? Why do we play when we have a headache, when we think it's only a headache? And it turns out being much more than that. And we're going to have our producer come up, Jordan Laroche.
Hey, Gooch.
Jordan, how are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry for this.
Yeah, this is going to be a little bit of a different of a show. Last week we had Scott Haller, of course, from the Shift Concussion Management Group, explain to us some of the concussion 101, just the basics. We were just getting a feel for it because over the next couple of months, I'm going to bring on doctors. I'm going to bring on people like yourself who have lived through concussions, obviously in some dark moments. We're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to get up and close and personal to you, not as the producer of the shows, but as a person battling through it and going through the trials and tribulations and I want to say that tunnel, that dark tunnel you get into where you don't have any of the answers. And I think that's really important. So let's get started on yourself. Obviously, you played hockey, you're a goaltender, and throughout your career, you know, you probably suffered more concussions than were documented. But I think it's really important to kind of get the basis of where it started. So you started playing hockey. And then when do you think you received your first concussion?
I was probably 13, 14 around that age. I remember pretty well. I was skating out as a player at the time, just for a practice in a men's league, and we were doing that that basketball drill, the 3-man weave. You pass the puck over, you skate over, it's behind the other guy, but they had two lines going at the same time, and I was looking to make a pass. I got my head taken off by someone who was much, much bigger than me at the time. So I just remember like laying down on the ground there, not really knowing what really happened because I felt the contact, and then I woke up with 3-4 people around me, just checking to see if I was okay. But again, it's just one of those things where I had no idea what was going on. I had a killer headache. But at the same time, as a 13-year-old kid, I kind of just wanted to keep going, and I kind of just pushed through it, which, you know, has its risks. But again, I was 13. I didn't fully understand what really happened.
Well, sorry, I was just getting an email from somebody asking a question. Then, obviously, you know, you being a goaltender, are you a higher risk? So that's pretty cool that somebody would ask that. We'll get into that in a few minutes because you were actually playing out for your first one, and obviously you sustained more than one. Documented, I think you mentioned 5.
Yeah. So from that went to my next one was playing junior varsity hockey at Stansted College in Quebec. A 3-on-1. One guy just didn't stop skating. Skated right through me. And then from that went to lacrosse, where again my own teammate actually took my own head off when I was. But we were killing a penalty. I was boxing someone out. I was bent over the ball, and one of my teammates tried to come scoop up the ball and just ran right through me again. And then from there, my last, which I eventually was my last one, was in junior hockey. Again, just a call up at practice, took a shot from the hash marks, hit me in the head. And then later on that season, I had gone through the diagnosis initially and made my return, but probably a week or two before playoffs, again in warm up, just another shot to the head, and you know that was it for me.
Well, your father's joined us from overseas saying, hidden for far too long. You guys exposed it for what it is. It's real. There's no question. Sometimes people would say to you, come on, shake it off. It's just, you know, you've got your bell rung. Now, you mentioned 5 different concussions. So we're going to talk to you. I want to hear the differences of those individual concussions. But what's also important, people don't realize a concussion doesn't know age, doesn't know gender, doesn't know borders. and certainly doesn't know the skill level or what activity you're in. And so you mentioned that you got one in hockey as a forward, you got one playing as a goaltender, you got one in lacrosse. And so sometimes people say, oh, they don't count, you don't add them up, but they have to be added up. You could have fallen down a set of steps, you could have run into a wall, you could have been in a car accident. All of these concussions are accumulative. You have to make sure that you tell people that I've had 1, 2, 3. You can't dismiss them. So talk to us about the symptoms possibly of the first concussion. Do you remember those?
Again, it was a while ago, but I had the general stuff like the headache, the dizziness, the drowsiness. The anxiety didn't really come until my third or fourth concussion. That's when it kind of started getting pretty bad. But what I noticed from each concussion to the next one, my recovery time was a little bit longer. My symptoms were a little bit more intense. So just kind of going through that progression, like, maybe I wasn't fully recovered either, but still at the same time, like, just realizing that I went through all these different things and was able to kind of come back from that to do what we're doing today is still pretty tough. But I just, if every concussion, I developed more symptoms. Again, like I said earlier, I anxiety pretty badly after my third and fourth concussions. And then actually after my fifth concussion, Scott Holler actually diagnosed me with a lazy eye as well. So that was kind of the whole recovery from that as well.
You sure it was a lazy eye? I know you have a tough time getting up in the morning. Hey, listen, let's talk a little bit more about the education prior to, because I want to get back to the differences of all your concussions, right? Because the symptoms are, I would assume, different, as you just mentioned, but more importantly, the length. Thank you for saying that. That's a very common occurrence. It always seems that they come easier. But what education did you have? Obviously, you're a lot younger than I am. I got started in this over 12 years ago. My first major concussion that was diagnosed was in Germany in 1988. We didn't really think much about it then. We didn't have any education. Now, as you grew up, there was more education. But again, you weren't playing in North America. You were playing, obviously, over back in Hong Kong and China. And, I don't think they even knew what a concussion was. So you were kind of behind the eight ball when you got here. So talk to me, were you ever educated? Did any organization or any coach come to you and say, hey, listen, this is what a concussion is, and this is what we need to do if you feel these symptoms?
Like in terms of that, not really. Especially in Hong Kong, there was nothing into it. And the first time I even heard about concussion was when Sidney Crosby kind of had his kind of episodes with them. But even coming to Canada, I went to Stansted College, which is a pretty good private school with a very good hockey program. They didn't bring anyone in. They didn't have anyone come to speak to us about concussions. So even then, it was still kind of a blind eye to me. I had a coach who taught everyone about how to take a hit, give a hit. That could only do so much. Like even if you take a hit properly and it's not that big of a hit, you can still get a concussion from that. So there's a lot of misconceptions, especially when it comes to hockey with that, because it can just be a little hit, like a little bump against the boards that can even cause it. So I am a little upset that I didn't really get taught all this looking back at it now. But I'm glad to be playing a part in kind of spreading the word about this.
Well, your dad, of course, very proud of you. Pretty amazing to see what you're doing after all that you went through. You've made it. Well, he's actually with the Gooch. I'm not sure. It's not Gretzky there, buddy, but at least he's halfway up the ladder. Listen, I want to go back to the differences of concussions because people, obviously, the question that I got here was goalies get concussions. And we saw that with, obviously, Carey Price this year taking a knee to the head. Obviously, when you guys are down or somebody skating through your crease and you're standing, you're focused on a puck, somebody hitting you in those rotational concussions. Those are what they're unilateral or rotational, which means you're getting hit on the chin. You're probably getting far more rotational concussions, or goaltenders are, because you're down on the ice trying to find the puck, and then somebody hitting you from the sides. So talk to us about that. Being a goaltender, did you ever really think you would get a concussion?
I honestly thought I was safer from concussions throughout the longest time. But like if you really kind of break it down, the goalies really aren't. You're probably even more susceptible just because the way when we're in our stance, we're almost hunched over, not so much hunched over, but we're low to the ground. Our heads in front of our shoulders. We're not upright, so our head's very exposed for guys to cut through the crease or even take a shot. And even going down your butterfly as well, you're covered up a post. People are trying to jam the puck in. You take a knee, you take a fist so easily there. There's just a lot of different situations where goalies can get hurt in. And I was a little less fortunate because I got ran and I took pucks to the head. That's one of those is avoidable, the other isn't. But at the end of the day, like it still really kind of affected my recovery. And even nowadays, taking a shot to the head, my bell does get rung a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's not. I'm not like out of commission or anything, but I do feel it.
You are watching Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury, brought to you by the good people at Fired Up Network, and of course, Stop Concussions, Shift Concussion Management. All right, talk to us about the experience of receiving a concussion and then obviously needing to get looked at. Were there any doctors, like did the coaches say to you, hey, listen, Jordan, I think maybe you've suffered a concussion, sit here for a few minutes, let's ask you a few questions? Was there a trainer involved? Once it's established that you can't go back into net, what happened then? What was the procedure? Let's talk about your first and second concussion.
Yeah. So my first one, I I finished off the rest of the practice. I went home. I didn't think anything too much of it until the next morning, where I just had a raging headache. And then we were on our way to school, when it was still really bothering me. And my parents just said, screw it, we'll take you get a CT scan, kind of get checked up and everything. And I don't remember what the doctors actually said, but I remember I was back swimming less than a week later, and it went by pretty quickly. But kind of as I came to Canada, it was taken a little more seriously. Like when I was at Stansted College, when I got my first concussion there, I spent a couple of days in the nurse's office. They had a full kind of house there where I was able to, kind of get away from everyone, sit in a dark room, and that was the procedure then. Um, and obviously that's kind of changed a little bit now. And I saw that when I came in to see Scott Holler after my last concussion. Again, just everything that he did just kind of changed everything that I thought about kind of coming back from this. I said earlier I developed a lazy eye. I went through whole like different 3D ball training to try and retrain the eye, because the issue it wouldn't go in; it would only go out.
Really?
So I was tracking different balls, different movements. We were doing hand-eye coordination things. I was actually encouraged to go out for walks and even light jogs, which when I went through my first concussions would have been unheard of.
Yep.
So it's kind of just it's nice to see that the way it's kind of treated has changed a lot.
Well, I'll tell you what, Brett Favre came out today saying children under the age of 14 should not play tackle football. That's coming from Brett Favre, obviously taking a stance with our good friend Chris Nowinski, the Sports Legacy Foundation, or Concussion Legacy Foundation. They're doing great work. And of course, when a Brett Favre steps up and says that, we've got to be listening. Obviously, it's really important to understand too, our good friend Robert Wine, who's been involved with this for a long time. He's visibly injured. Not only the brain injury, but with his body. He always says about Keith and I, we both suffered severe concussions. We've come through it. Wow, Jordan is another completely invisible post-concussion person. Well, talk to me about that then. And your parents, obviously, John, your father's here. Talk to me about the fact that, are you a different person? I know that Keith is. He's got a new normal. He's not who he was before all of these concussions. I know I'm aging, of course, so we don't know some of my forgetfulness and some of my inability to focus. Is that because that's how I always was? Or is it now playing its role as we get older? Can you talk to me about you? Do you feel that, because you're much younger, have you noticed any differences pre and post?
It is still a little tough to tell because it wasn't actually like that long ago either. But at the same time, I've kind of, there's no great way to say this. I had a really tough time after my concussions. I went through a lot of depression and anxiety, and actually went through some really hard times at school as well. But I after kind of like a year buffer period, I took a year off hockey. I kind of I want to readjust the way different things were in my life with my social circle and schooling and all that as well. So there were a lot of changes already going on in my life when I got my concussions. I had just broken up with a pretty toxic relationship on top of that as well. So all these different things were already happening in my life. So it is kind of hard to tell just because I went through going from Western University switching over to Fanshawe College. That's a big change in itself. So I don't know if I've really noticed anything quite yet, but I'm sure over the next year or so, I'll be able to pick out a few different things. But in terms of again, with attention and all that, that does kind of play in a little bit now, more so than it did a couple of years ago. So it's just one of those things that I'll have to monitor over the next little bit.
Well, I'm very, very honored that Jamie Uretsky has joined us. She's been a big part of the Stop Concussion platform down in the States. Carrie, I'm glad you brought up the new normal because that's something a lot of people can't understand post-concussion. Her beautiful young daughter suffered several concussions. Madeline, I've met her. She's just a wonderful girl. And Jamie, we'd love to get Madeline on in a couple of weeks to talk about, obviously, the differences between men and women. Boys and girls, we know there's a huge difference in obviously our DNA and obviously the results of concussion. Some are saying that they last longer in women, and we'd love to have Madeline join us, and she's doing a great job with the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Obviously, that's Chris Nowinski and Robert Cantu, Dr. Robert Cantu, and Dr. Ann McKee. So thank you, Jamie, for joining us. Listen, your father's come up. One of the big challenges for parents was the doctors had had an opinion, but Scott took us in a different direction. Not an easy decision. We took a chance, but we went against convention at the time. So hard for parents, but we went through it rightly. Well, again, it's really important when a person is concussed, and we're trying to get rid of some of these myths. Right. So that's why we're putting the show on. That's why we're getting a great opportunity to talk to you, Jordan, where somebody says goalies get concussed. Yes. So we can establish things that maybe some people don't understand. We know that you said you're a goalie, you've got a big goalie mask on, you took a couple shots to the head, and you were still concussed. So we know that the helmet and the goalie mask are not preventing concussions. They're protecting you from getting lacerations, broken jaws and bones. They are not there to protect you from a concussion. So it's really important to get rid of some of these myths that obviously come along. Obviously, having Scott Holler in our back pocket, he is a tremendous. You're going to talk to us about that in a few minutes. But it's really important to get properly diagnosed, then a proper personalized management system. So the therapies are around you, not specifically like a light switch and just a generic, okay, we're going to do this, and this, because it's worked for every other person. It doesn't. Every concussion is different and every person is different. So walk through with me the difference between your first concussion and your fifth concussion. Did you notice any differences as far as different symptoms? Not so much that maybe it came on quicker, but were there different symptoms? Because, there are roughly 21 symptoms, and you don't have to have all of them to be concussed. You can have only one of them. And so that's the challenge we have. And as parents, what your father and mother obviously went through, because it's an unknown and they're not registered neurologists, they'd have to go through the dark until they find the right person. And thank God Scott was that right person.
Yeah, clearly on the first one, all my symptoms were very, I think I call them very physical. Like I had the headache for pain, and I didn't really start experiencing the anxiety till my fourth or fifth concussion, and just the way that kind of affected everything as well. With anxiety comes depression, and with depression comes a whole list of other things. So that was probably the biggest difference between the two. And in terms of like the treatment, just quickly, after my fourth concussion, I went to the clinic at Western University at Fowler Kennedy, and I had the doctor come in with a clipboard. She was asking me questions from the clipboard, that kind of thing, and I just right off the bat, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and so after I got hurt later on that season, I went to a trainer of mine, Dan Blackburn, who I had worked with in the past, and he put me in contact with the Gooch, and in turn, the Gooch put me in contact with Scott Holler. And just the way Scott Holler, from the first second he walked into the room, he had no paper on him. He was just sitting down talking to me one on one. I was lucky that my mom actually was in town around that time, because the last three concussions that I had gone through, I had to deal essentially on my own.
Yeah.
I was at boarding school and then university. My parents are in Hong Kong, so they can't really make that trip that easily. But I was very lucky that the last time around, sorry, I did have someone there to kind of help me get through all of that.
And one of the things that you said, I think is really important, is that Scott just makes you comfortable and lets you know you're not alone, and he's going to make sure he finds the right therapies to get you better. And again, I'm going to go back to the new normal. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get back to where you're going to be permanently. So I heard a guy speak once, and his thoughts were, it was a doctor who said, think about having a bookshelf with 12 books on it, and the bookshelf gets knocked over and 12 books fall on the ground, and somebody only puts 11 back on the shelf. That's basically what happens sometimes with concussions. Something doesn't come back, and you have to learn how to deal with that. And both Keith and I have been through that. Here's a great comment again from your father, who's watching attentively in Thailand. Parents, support and persistence. You will get there someday. You feel just helpless, but it can be treated on more than one occasion. We flew across the world just to sit with Jordan. And that I've almost got tears in my eyes. I get emotional about this stuff because I, like you, I was in, my major concussion happened while I was in Germany on my own, and just teammates around. And I woke up in a hospital with 5 German doctors leaning over talking German, and I was only been in Germany for 3 weeks, and I was alone. And basically they were talking German, and I had no clue what they were talking about. That aloneness, that not having that support group was so important. Is so important, and that was wonderful that your father and mother were able to at least assist you at that time. There's a lot of people that don't. And that's why we're doing this show, Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury. We want you to know we're here for you. I am not a doctor by any means, but I have lived it. I have lived the dark side, and I am here to make sure we have people like Jordan explaining to you what they've gone through, because you're going to probably say, yeah, I felt like that. So if Jordan felt like that and he got better, I have hope. So if I could ask you to kind of give hope. Obviously, you went through some trials and tribulations. You met Scott, but prior to Scott, you had kind of a disconcern. There was a direction people were trying to take you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you went through that. Then got to Scott, where he made you feel, I found the person that's going to listen to me and understand me.
Yeah, like a lot of like the first kind of treatments I went through, they didn't really explain why I was feeling the way I was feeling or what was happening. It was more just, do you feel this? Do you feel that? Are you okay? And they do the automated reactions tests and all that, but it just wasn't for me. I felt kind of awkward just sitting there, just being asked question after question after question, and then just like I said, Scott is just changed put that whole thing, flip the script, and going from having someone who it didn't really sound like they knew what they were talking about. They probably did, but going to Scott, where he talked me through, why I had the lazy eye, why I was feeling a little anxious, why I was feeling a little depressed as well. There are reasons behind that, and that's just so much more comforting to hear, saying that, as opposed to you have a concussion, you're anxious. You have a concussion, you're depressed. You have a concussion, you have a headache. There's actual reasons, scientific reasons why all that actually happens, and that just changed the whole thing for me.
Well, it's the unknown, right? Unknown, of course, even what we're living through with the pandemic. We just don't know what's coming next. And in a concussion, you feel like that. You feel like you're in a dark tunnel, and sometimes you can't see that light at the end of it. And that's what Scott brought along. Listen, just before we let you go, I think there's an important question coming from Robert Wine. Brady Leopold, thank you for joining us. Brady, we're doing an event on August the 21st. We would love you to be a part of it. Make sure you send me a text, Brady, and we'll have a call and talk about that. Thank you for joining. It's all about concussions and the great work that you're doing with mental health. Jordan, how is your school abilities, retaining the info from tests and such? With me, Robert had a traumatic brain injury, a little bit more severe. He likes to just call it a concussion, but I'm not sure his was specifically a concussion, but he's a phenomenal guy. He's read my book called Concussed once, and I'm starting it again. And it's barely like I've read it before. Talk to us a little bit about that. Do you have problems with retention? Do you remember that you have those issues? Are you moody? Have you changed like in your personality? Has anybody said that?
I have noticed a little bit more, like just being a little, my mood fluctuates a little more than I usually did in the past. But in terms of like actually schooling ability, um, I went through some pretty hard times at school, like I said earlier. And I was forced to switch out of Western to go to Fanshawe. And a large part of that was due to the concussions and not being able to attend class, and I developed anxiety about talking to my professors, to saying that I even had a concussion in the first place. So there's a lot going on that it really kind of put me down even more than I already was. So it was just a real tough situation, but I was able to. I found a new program. I was doing sociology at Western. I switched over to broadcast journalism, and I really kind of found my calling. So I always kind of frame my concussions as a blessing in disguise. Um, there was so much bad with it that came with it as well, but I was able to. It gave me the opportunity, or almost forced me to switch programs into something that I actually really wanted to do. And I really enjoyed my last 2 years at Fanshawe doing journalism with the great staff there as well. And hopefully I can make something more of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're doing a phenomenal job. And yes, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, because had you not gone concussed, we probably would have never met, and we wouldn't be on this journey of all the great things, even through the pandemic. And the craziness that you live with as you live with us. And certainly today's not about me, it's about you telling your story. And I want to thank your father very much. For Kerry was a beam of light, almost unbelievable. We were wondering why someone would do what he did. Kerry just dropped everything and came to Jordan's rescue and followed up almost daily from somewhere in the world. Kerry brought us Scott, and the rest is history. That's very kind of you, to John, but my mother brought me up like that. Let's help people that can't help themselves, because I know you would be there for me. And John, I know for sure you'd be there if I was struggling and needed help. And that's why we're on the planet. And I know Brady Leopold is also of the same mindset, along with Paul Rosen. Final part, Jordan writes now, which wasn't a passion in the past. Amazing it wasn't part of his past. Absolutely blessed. Now, I want to tell you, I've read stories where a person has been concussed and never touched a piano, but yet after they were concussed, they were concert pianists. These are true stories. People that couldn't speak a language all of a sudden couldn't remember the language they were proficient in and could speak another language. And so it's really bizarre how the mind works. And I want to say this, that we are at the stage now, back in the 1900s, with open heart surgery. When a person had a heart attack, the doctors couldn't understand what was going on because they couldn't touch it, feel it, or smell it. Now that we can open the chest and see the heart and be able to review it in its living form, it really helped us understand heart attacks and heart functioning. With the brain, we're still not at that moment where we can just plop the lid off, pull out the brain, and kind of analyze it. So it's going to take time. So we're right at this infancy stage of understanding this very complex engineering part. Like, it does everything for us. Without a brain, you can't function. And it actually helps the heart function. So we do know that if you're having concussed issues, you can have issues with the heart. Keith was one of them. I was on a heart monitor for 7 days while I was going through my trials and tribulations, and it did affect all the aspects. Oh, it's just a brain injury. Ah, it's just a headache. No, no, no. It's more than that, and we have to take it serious. Jordan, final question to you, or final ask is, if you could write yourself when you were 13 today and said, hey, bud, you got to make sure that you take care of this. Don't play through it. Don't suck it up. This isn't a broken leg. It's a broken brain. What would you say to yourself?
You know, at a certain point, you have to come. You have to come first. And what I mean by that is, I have a hard tendency of kind of putting other people, putting myself over other people. I like to help other people where I can, here and there, before I actually look at myself and actually see what I need to do and what needs to be done for me. So, and a lot of that was part of the concussions as well. You know, our backup goalie wasn't feeling great, or this guy couldn't go in, so I just kind of played through it. I remember playing through a really bad hip injury. I remember playing through sprained ankles, broken fingers. So a lot of that just kind of comes back to you have to kind of move on from that and kind of be a little more selfish. There isn't anything really wrong with it, I don't think. And you know, because if you do, it can lead you to even worse position than you are. And you know, everything at the end is going to be okay. And this is frozen.
I was frozen for a sec. Oh, it was my concussion. Hey, Jordan, thank you so much for being vulnerable, opening up and talking to us about this injury. Terry Rivard from the Fired Up Network has been after this show for a while. It's just two guys talking about their experiences with concussions. And now we'll actually bring on doctors. I'm actually going to try and see if I can get Chris Nowinski on next week, or I will have a tremendous guest. It will be from the medical world next week. And 2 weeks from today, I'll bring on another athlete that has suffered very similar to yourself. The only great thing about it is, Jordan, I'm around you. You're a wonderful young man. You've got a bright future, and you will be a tremendous journalist. Your writing's impeccable. Thank God you're here, because you're my spell check. Jordan, thank you. Thank you for opening up and allowing us to understand concussions are real and you have to take them very seriously. And now we're starting to understand invisible injury. Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, Gooch.
I got to stop pushing the buttons. I was the producer and host today. I wanted Jordan just to take a night off because obviously dealing with all these concussions may have tired him out. Listen, I just want to say this is an incredible opportunity for you to learn more about concussions. I will make sure I turn every stone over. If you have a question, if you have a concern, if you have somebody that's concussed, reach out. We are here 24/7. And Robert Wine, thank you. Trust me, I totally agree about Kerry, because what he did, heck, always does, turn me from a very dark place in my mind to feeling awesome about myself. I thank you for all the accolades, but this isn't about me. This is about you. You learning through us, we lived it. Jordan has lived it. Robert has lived it. And we will bring you the information that'll help you through it. You are not alone. I know we're talking about a pandemic. We're not alone. You are not alone. You have Stop Concussions. You have Shift Concussion Management. And you know what the best thing is? You have us on your side. All right. Thank you for joining us for our second episode of Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury, brought to you by those good people at Fired Up Network. Good night.